Hi YouTube, this is Helga from the Inner Woods. Today I want to talk to you about love and the fear of being seen. In my experience, these things are directly connected. When we do not get enough love as children, or perhaps do not internalize it, which can often happen for neurodivergent individuals, for example, since in the case of some neurodivergencies, such as autism, the world and all of the experiences that the individual has do get passed through a very intellectual lens, and it can be difficult to perceive oneself as being loved when this kind of barrier is there between you and the love that your caregivers are attempting to give you, which is, of course, nobody's fault, just one of the things that we need to keep in mind. So that's one thing that can happen. It doesn't necessarily happen for everybody, but it often does happen. So for either that reason, or perhaps somebody was quite unfortunate in their early circumstances and didn't get enough love from the people around them, they would not then, growing up, be able to perceive themselves as being loved or loved enough. You know, I suppose it's a spectrum, it can be that. And this actually translates into various things, since being loved is one of those things that early on in our existence on earth we really need as like a basic brick in the foundation of our entire existence and self. So this then makes the whole structure of the growing human quite rickety, and there are many problems that can come from that. However, today I want to specifically talk about how this translates then into fear of being seen. So being seen is something that happens to us first in our lives when we are in a loving bond with someone. So like I said, this is usually very early on in our lives. And these two things are then linked. So if somebody is not paying enough attention to you, is not really seeing you, then they are also not really loving you. And whether you're neurodivergent or not, you are going to feel that. You're going to perceive it, you're going to internalize it. And this lack then creates, well, the first thing it does, of course, as you're growing, it creates this huge need to be liked, and a lot of people pleasing tendencies come from a bit of a, I mean, it can be a small deficiency depending on your situation, a bit of a deficiency in being seen and loved and cared for. However, that's not the topic of today's video, because then we do get older and we need to interact with the world in various ways. And whatever those ways are, they involve being seen. Whether you need to go to a job interview or share your knowledge with the world in any way, or find a partner to be with, you will need to be seen for the world to interact with you and for you to get something from the world. And if you do not interact with the world and get all of those things, you will find yourself in a very bad place. That is a very real thing that can happen. And so I am speaking on this because as a neurodivergent individual, I know that this is an especially big problem for neurodivergent individuals, and it gets lumped into symptoms of neurodivergency all too easily. However, it's a thing in and of itself, so this is not a symptom of neurodivergence. It's just something that very often happens to neurodivergence, for the reason that it's harder for them to internalize that initial connection of being seen and being loved in very early days and years of their lives. And, well, as I said, this isn't exclusive to neurodivergence, so this also happens to people with various degrees of unfortunate circumstances in their early lives. And also, I suppose, although I'm not sure about that, there must be neurodivergents out there who were able to internalize love and care, even in their intellectualized way, due to a heightened amount of patience and care around them. So again, this isn't a symptom of neurodivergence. And neurodivergence specifically would then, with all of the other symptoms that they do experience, find it especially hard to overcome this particular thing, which would then make it especially hard for them to interact with the world, where this necessity to present themselves to the world and be seen is going to be most important and necessary, which then leaves them quite vulnerable in many ways. So, having said that, I would like to offer a little bit of my experience in how this actually is able to be transformed. Personally, I have certainly suffered from a crippling fear of being seen for decades, even, of my life. And I'd like to even say that the degree to which this was the case was quite severe. There was a time in my life where I was unable to leave my home because there were people outside and they may see me. And then when I absolutely have to leave my home, I would make sure to always wear the same clothing, and for that clothing to not stand out. Um, so this had big impact even on like my self-image and how I took care of myself, how I dressed myself, and all of that. The reason for this wish for the clothing to always be the same was not because my autism demanded me to always have the same thing. It was actually in that particular case, although many autistics like to wear the same thing, it's fine. What I mean is, I do like to wear different clothes personally, but at the time, if I this is how I thought about it. If I wore something new, then people would notice. If they notice, they pay especially close attention to me, and that was terrifying. So that was the reasoning behind that. And many years later, I am actually quite fine with being seen. I do get occasional social anxiety. There usually are reasons for it. Maybe I'm feeling under the weather or something. Or I'm not talking to very nice people. That's a factor. However, I'm actually quite okay being seen. And what I have discovered is that at the core of this shift was that over the years, having had various life experiences and various relationships in my personal life, intimate relationships, I was able to internalize that I could be loved. And once that happened, I was able to interact with the world dressed as I wanted to dress, take care of myself a lot better, really see that I was presentable, I was fine to just go out and do things with other people. And this shift was really very great. However, internalizing the, like, just installing the new belief into myself, that belief that I am a lovable being, and I am loved, was loved, am loved, will be loved, whatever. It's not even linked to a specific time. It's just there, right? That wasn't very easy, especially that wasn't very easy to internalize it from the intimate relationships that it came from, because those were confined to a particular time. So, for example, like in the first relationship that this happened for me, that relationship lasted sometimes, then it kind of ended. Um, well, it turned into a friendship actually, but that's not the point. So it so seeing as that was my intellectually fully uh, conscious first experience of that, where I properly believed it, and then the end of that relationship, that didn't do much for that belief of being loved and then being able to be perceived by the world. Because then my intellectual brain would tell myself, oh, but there is no more love, see? So that in itself isn't enough, just like having one experience. Maybe even just having two experiences, still not enough, especially for an autistic brain, because an autistic brain turns these experiences into data as opposed to a lived experience that turns into a belief. And the data says, well, yes, you were loved, but you no longer are. And then again, same thing happens. That only reinforces perhaps even the belief that, well, it may have been, for example, a mistake of some kind, or maybe there was this hope of love on both ends and it didn't work out because perhaps you really are unlovable, you know? So that's like the biggest problem there. However, this is fixable, thankfully, and the kind of shift that needs to happen inside this autistic understanding of these experiences is the linking up this whole scenario to the understanding of the cyclical nature of things, kind of. So, taking the data of these experiences, if you had those experiences, because I was lucky enough to have had those experiences, taking the data and expanding, well, building that data into the context that it needs to lie inside, and that context being not that we just have these isolated incidents that don't prove the existence of love in this case, because this whole thing actually applies to other things as well, and other beliefs that we can shift. So when you stop looking at it like there was an incident where I was loved and then I was not, and then there was another incident where I was loved and then I was not, and all that tells you is that there is no love right now. And you're actually questioning whether there was at any point, since, you know, the whole issue here is that the internalized belief that you are lovable, that's not supposed to end. So it cannot coexist with something that ended. That foundational brick inside ourselves that we get from our caretakers, that belief that we are lovable, it's an endless kind of love. So that belief and that yearning is for an endless kind of love. It cannot change. You can basically, the belief that you are unlovable cannot change if you are experiencing a love that ends, because that inherently is not that love that you are looking for. The belief needs to be a belief in an endless love. However, in our adult lives, basically all love with other people is a love that ends. So that makes it a very problematic, again, thing that is difficult to shift. And how this is shifted is through looking at it from the point of view that love is maybe like the waves of an ocean, coming in, flowing out, ebbing and flowing, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it looks like it isn't, but it's there, there's just less of it. And then hopefully, sorry, hopefully then you're able to kind of see that there was a big wave of love in your life with a person coming into it that subsided perhaps when that relationship ended. And then love came in again with somebody else and it subsided perhaps. And it's the same love. So if you're just taking the concept of love outside of those people and outside of your self-concept, so it's not that you were given love and it was taken away. That's very important. It's not that. And it's not that the love came with these people and cannot come outside of them. It's just that in your life, you interacted with the phenomenon of love. And the phenomenon of love came at you in these different waves. And therefore, it's actually there. You're always interacting with it. It's always there. It's there because you've already experienced it. Once you have experienced it, that means that that's it, it's there. So I hope I explained that in a way that maybe is understandable, because this is what really, really shifted things for me. And when I was able to grasp this concept that gradually developed for me through a lot of introspection and observing things in my life, events in my life, then I was really not only just having this beautiful experience of feeling this love that I don't even necessarily need somebody for, although it helps, but it actually seeped right into my self-concept and those internal foundations that were deficient. And as a result, I became perfectly fine with being seen and actually quite happy to be seen. So I think I'll stop there. That's what I wanted to share today. Thank you for listening.